Good morning, Victoria. Thanks for joining us today. We're here for another one of our transition talk with Victoria Garrick, and she will introduce herself in a minute. We're here to talk about athletic retirement as usual, trying to feature as many former athletes as possible, talking about their stories in athletics and beyond, and how they handle athletic retirement. Victoria, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And can you start with giving us an introduction of you and your sporting career in volleyball?
Thanks for having me. Yes, I played volleyball since the 8th grade. I played Division I at USC in Los Angeles for 4 years. And I did not continue after college. So that was definitely my peak. And I don't play anymore, sadly, because it's so hard to play indoor volleyball. You need 12 people, you need a net, you need balls, you need a lot. So you can't just do it outside with a golf. You can't go to a golf course, can't go to a tennis court. So, which has been sad because, I would love to get in the gym, but unfortunately, no, I haven't been playing.
I don't do synchronized swimming either because the same thing, you need a pool, you need a team. Yeah, it's quite difficult, but I do plenty of other stuff. Let's dive into your athletic retirement straight away. I want to talk about your other project and the hidden opponent and mental health. Can you tell us first, how the end of your career came about? I know it was you finished college, but sort of like tell us a bit about emotions and mindset as you got closer to the end of college and the end of your career.
I feel like I reached a point at the end of my college career where I was done. I thought even if I had another 5th year to play, I was just totally emotionally and physically maxed out. Even that 4th year was one that I didn't know if I would do because it was a lot. But I did it. I'm really proud of myself for that. But yeah, when the season was ending, I just knew that there was more that I wanted to do in this world. I think, unlike majority of athletes, I was actually very excited for what I could do beyond the game. And I had sort of tapped into that a little bit my junior and senior year in social media with YouTube. So I was excited to see where that could take me. I certainly had a lot of hesitation and worry around my identity because I was known as this volleyball player. And when I gave my TED talk, it was USC volleyball player TED talk. When I did the Players Tribune article, USC volleyball player produces this video, so I was like, oh, when I'm not a USC volleyball player, what's my title and who am I? And that was tough for me in the beginning. And I definitely feel like I kind of clung to being a volleyball player, as long as I could. And then eventually in 2020, so a full year after I graduated, I just really realized I can't keep creating volleyball content. I can't keep throwing on my practice jersey and trying to milk this. It's over. And I was nervous to start to branch out into different types of content on intuitive eating or general mental health, body image, relatable relationship content. Now I post about planning a wedding. I posted about decorating my apartment. There's a lot of worry from me around, is this going to be interesting to people? Will people care about this if I'm not an athlete? And it took time to get people used to that. It took time for me to feel comfortable in that. But yeah, now I'm at a place where my average follower doesn't even know I played Division I sports. And when they hear about it, they're like, whoa, that's really cool. So it's funny how things change.
It's really interesting to hear a super positive transition, and also the fact that you, maybe without knowing, prepared really well for this. You did a lot of different things through your college career, like you said, your TED talk, and being quite vocal about mental health at a time when it wasn't as fashionable as now. All these things really prepared for what you're doing now, and you're kind of an example of someone who's been doing this, where I think now athletes are starting to think about it a little bit more, and what could they do now to prepare, and how can they use social media to their advantage to build a brand and then become an entrepreneur. This is what you did. 5-6 years ago. That's a really great example.
Yeah, and I love that you kind of highlighted that it is more of like a positive story. It's like I didn't graduate and then not work, and like my depression was in college, so I think it's important to talk about a story like this because it's hopeful. And I think, like you mentioned, athletes have opportunities now to start thinking ahead and really kind of building out like their place in the world. And when you're an athlete, like there's just something about that, especially a college athlete, that just really like legitimizes you and qualifies you as like a hardworking, dedicated, driven person. And there are people in the athletic community who like want to help you. And there are opportunities you can get because you're a college athlete that a normal traditional student wouldn't be able to get. Like the fact that I was able to, co-produce and direct a video with the Players Tribune as a junior was only because I was a college athlete. I mean, if I reached out as a normal student, that publication just, it wouldn't have worked for them. So yeah, I think I was always thinking about like how to leverage my platform, how to use my platform. In the very beginning, it wasn't like that. I genuinely went through my own crisis and then really wanted to talk about that because I didn't want anyone to have to go through what I went through. But then on the other side of that, when like the TED Talk is receiving views and people are reading my article and people are sending me messages, yeah, then my wheels start turning of, oh, okay, well, I have more to share, and how can I share it in different ways and that can reach more people? So that by the time I was a senior, I was able to jump straight into public speaking and visiting schools around the country. And then even from there, I had to evolve again because from 2019 to 2020, I was traveling and I was speaking. And then the pandemic hit and there's no in-person engagements. Everything is canceled. And I'm having to kind of turn into social on like, okay, how can I build these platforms even more? How can I monetize them? So, yeah, my journey was not one that I expected. But it's all seemed to work out so far, knock on wood. I will say though, yeah, the identity thing I have struggled with a little bit recently. I almost feel like my transition struggles were a little bit delayed because I did have this very seamless transition into this businesswoman who also was able to like really carry that identity of her as an athlete. Like I'm a public speaker my first year of school, but I'm talking about the last 4 years. I'm talking about a version of myself that doesn't really exist anymore, but I'm reflecting on it to help people. And then eventually as we go on, like now it's 2022, it's been 7, 8, 9, it's 18, 19, 20. It's been almost 5 years since my TED Talk. And I do feel removed from that girl. I'm not depressed now. Of course, I have mental health struggles, but I'm different and I'm evolved. And I've even noticed it's very hard for me to want to talk about it. Like, I am very selective now when I do, like, I don't remember the last time I did an interview, but because you reached out to the hidden opponent and like I have a soft spot and I love what you're doing, I'm happy to do it. But a little part of me doesn't love to reflect because she wants to grow on from that. So that's my current like battle in therapy right now is like, how do I move on from this old version of me, even though that was very helpful for people and I identified with that for so long, to now be a version of me who is happy and not on meds and planning a wedding and is not a college student, so I feel like I'm having an identity crisis now.
Yeah, I completely understand. But I think there's a space for you to be this advocate, which is what you've been doing really through the different channels that you have over the last 5 years, where you can talk about this topic because you've lived it. You're not in it anymore, but you lived it and you can testify and share and help others understand it without like being in the depths of it. It's really interesting. I commend you for sizing the opportunity and seeing, what you could do with your platform at a time where maybe, not a lot of others would see this, and the creativity and the flexibility to keep that going in maturing as you went through, so that you had something to do right out the gate after college. I think that's pretty amazing. And can you tell me about if you struggle with any physical challenges, the fact that you were not playing as much, how did that impact your daily life and your structure?
It was weird at first, but I have to be honest too. Like, I was so excited to just not have to work out. And I really kind of went into like a rebellion mode of like, I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm not working out. I'm not like, I had a workout planned like every single day for the past 10 years of my life. The idea that I just didn't have to have anything on the schedule, like, it felt nice. Like, my body almost needed to just rest. So I took like, I don't even know. It was definitely at least 4 months, maybe 6 months off of like any type of workout other than maybe going on walks outside. So also it was the pandemic. So like, you couldn't go to like the local gym, so there were different factors at play there. But it was an adjustment, but I, over the course of my college career, became very like intuitive with my eating, with my working out. And so I was able to really just check in with my body of, how do we feel? Like, do we feel like we want to keep resting? Do we feel like we have the itch and the bug to get a sweat in and get our heart rate up? Do we feel like we want to eat this for breakfast, or does this sound better? I kind of took it day by day with like kindness towards myself.
This is really interesting because I'm curious if this is something, and I know we said we don't really want to talk much about mental health, but I still want to.
Oh no, of course we can totally
like,
talk about it. We can totally talk about it. Don't be afraid to ask me. I'm literally just being honest.
do you feel that you've learned that through that experience of depression in college? Like, is this something that kind of served you to be more in tune with your body and yourself, and learning to like take it day by day and being more kind? Is this that actually served you after your sport?
Yes. When I was in college, I dealt with anxiety and depression, and I was a binge eater. So I had to do a lot of healing and a lot of work there to like understand what my anxiety was and how to manage it, and also how to come out of my depressive episode and navigate my relationship with food. And so a lot of those tools that I learned have helped me a lot now in like navigating those things when they arise. I will say that it can be very sneaky the way that, you learn to recognize the thought of, I'm not a good enough volleyball player and I'm going to be benched tonight. I got good at recognizing, okay, there's my anxiety. I know I'm a good player. This is in my control. It's like you almost develop a coping mechanism for a specific scenario. So I noticed that when I had graduated, I would have that anxiety around like, do these people like me? Am I posting enough? It was like a different worry, and I wasn't able to recognize like, oh, I can cope and use my tools I learned for volleyball for like a general life anxiety. So it took me a little bit to kind of recognize that anxiety and maybe some sadness was manifesting itself in a new way. But once I did, I was then able to kind of rework the muscle to navigate that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you spoke out on, the impact of social media and sort of like, the fake aspect of it, and how it can really impact young athletes and college athletes. It's interesting that it took you a while to, and I think it's the same for every athlete. Like it took us a while to transfer those skills over. And I think a lot of athletes have challenges articulating and using what they've learned into a different environment. It certainly takes some time to do that. Any specific or other challenges or other things that you struggle with over the last 4 years that you think are, related to your retirement from sport?
I think there are, I think something that I like to talk about is the transition itself there's no like obvious map for it. And I feel like oftentimes it can be very jarring, and athletes can feel like they totally have to wake up one day and forget that they ever played sports. Like, don't talk about it. No one cares. Stop living in the past. Like, you're out of college. That was high school. I think there's this pressure to like move on. And I don't like that, because it's hard to go from something being a part of your every single day for your whole life until you're 20 to then not have it be a part of your life. And so I think for me, I was very forgiving with myself, and I allowed myself, you can still wear your logos and your team stuff that you have, and you can cheer on the team and watch the games, and you can talk about it, and you can post about it in a throwback or for National Sports Day. Like, don't shy away from that being a beautiful part of your story. I don't like the way that society discourages athletes from being able to talk about the past.
I love that you're mentioning that. I really do, because I think it's a huge part of that grieving process in a healthy way. Like, you need to remember and cherish the good things that you got from your sport. And that goes through like, looking at pictures and film and going and see the games and cheering on the other teams and wearing your stuff. I think that's really awesome that you're mentioning that. We actually really have a big emphasis on this in our programs, especially in the beginning. Like, okay, let's reflect on everything you've learned and what you've been through, because yes, there are some negative. Even if you're retired with a really kind of negative experience, there are some great positives throughout your career, and you have to like look back and identify those, because they are as important as the negative experiences. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, and celebrating yourself and everything you've been through. Super important. It makes you what you are now. And you wouldn't be where you are if you didn't have those. So it's really cool to do that.
Totally.
Did you have a specific support network around you, or people that helped you through that period of transition?
Yes, I would say throughout my whole sports journey, I've been very privileged and blessed to have loving parents and access to resources and therapy that other people don't, especially at USC, the way that I was able to see a renowned sports psychologist and psychiatrist and get the meds prescribed that I needed and have that weekly therapy for free. I mean, all of those things are huge privileges that were absolutely instrumental in my healing journey. I think that's why now, especially with the hidden opponent, we don't want like any sort of paywall, any sort of limit to access of the resources and support we're trying to provide. When we bring in these professionals to meet with our community members, like, I always want that to be something they have access to, because especially at a lot of Division 2s, Division 3s, you don't have those resources. So that's something that we really like to stress. And then in my personal life, I have a very loving fiance I've been with for almost 6 years now, who's been like my best friend, amazing support. And then additional friends who I'm able to talk to. So yes, I have, an awesome network of people around me. And that is something that is important. Not having 5 or 10 or 50 people, but at least 1 or 2 people that you can open up to and that you can lean on and really be yourself with. And I would just encourage anyone listening to think about cultivating at least 1 or 2 of those relationships in your life, because they are very important and they can really be the difference in which path you take.
And having, someone who you can trust, who you can be your true self with, where you're not, playing any sort of games that perhaps happen, in your sports team or on social media, like someone you can share deep stuff with and get some real perspective on where you're at. You mentioned the hidden opponent. We've got to talk about it now and get, it's one of the great achievements that came out of your story. Can you tell us first, what's the hidden opponent for anybody who doesn't know?
Yeah, so the hidden opponent is our nonprofit, and it's basically founded to advocate, educate, and support student athletes dealing with mental health issues, and also create awareness. I think my main hope in just the initial thought of the hidden opponent was, how do we create a platform and a community where other student athletes just like me can get connected with others, can have that support, and can also have a platform to share their story. I was very lucky that everything worked out and the stars aligned and I was able to deliver a TED Talk. I mean, it's just crazy to think about the timing of everything. So creating a community where other athletes in that situation can sort of have everything that they need. And we have a campus captains program with current college and athlete ambassadors. We have an incredible leadership team, and people who work for the hidden opponent, you know, day in and day out, volunteering their time to give back to these athletes. Shout out Leanne, Mary, Andy. So it's really special. And it's awesome to see that like next generation of student athletes really taking it over.
It's fabulous what you've built, considering that this happened, it started before the pandemic, and like go through and for you to have, you know, a series of captain in campuses around the country for those who don't necessarily have access to resources. I think that's fabulous. And for anybody that haven't looked at the Hidden Opponents website, you should definitely go and check it out and even offer your time. I mean, I think it's so needed, especially now. Like, we really need that kind of support. And I feel like a lot of universities are approaching this with an open mind, and they really want to help. But I think the resources are the will is there now, the awareness is there, the will is there, the infrastructure are not quite there yet. So I think that what you guys are doing is really well placed and necessary. That's really awesome.
Thank you.
Victoria, do you have any advice for athletes who haven't retired yet? What can they do to prepare for the end of their career? And it could be any time, as we know, you know, you were lucky to be able to finish your college career. For some of them, you know, it can happen during college or even before. What can they do throughout their sports journey and their young life to prepare for that next phase?
I'm torn between like two different answers, you know, and this is like the story of my life. You know, the go-getter, achiever, athlete in me wants to say, think ahead about the various ways you can be setting yourself up for success, that you can network, that you can create a brand online, like the different ways that you can start planning and getting prepared for what comes after sport. Then the other part of me, who's much more trying to be present and trying to be chill and trying to trust the process, would say, live in the moment and enjoy your sports career while you have it, and trust that the future version of you will be able to handle whatever comes. You know, that's something Dr. Emily Onholt said to me once, is, you know, worrying about the future, you don't even know who you're going to be in that moment. And the future you is going to be different and perfect for that moment. And they're going to be able to handle it and then snap back into the present moment and try to live it up to your fullest. So, you know, those are, I would teeter between both of those. I think I did a little bit of both, and whichever one serves you.
Yeah, and I think it's a perfect answer, because there's not one solution for any athletes. We both know that the transition can be very different for anybody. And you can play on both sides. I think there's a lot of pressure at the moment to get athletes to do a lot outside of their sport and build their brand and be active on social media. And part of it, you know, is a result of Neil, and also the fact that the pandemic sort of brought that kind of free time for athletes to be doing other things. But the reality, as you know, when you're a college athlete, your time is so precious that adding anything else on top of what you're doing is adding another pressure, I think, and stressor. So where can we find you if anybody wants to follow you or connect with you? Where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Victoria Garrick. My website's victoriagarrick.com. And then I have a podcast titled Real Pod, where I have actually interviewed a handful of notable athletes who all kind of come on to get real and share their stories. And I actually do have an episode that I don't know if maybe you want to link it to this piece, specifically on the transition. And I think it's like the 7 things that I wish I knew. So I can share that as well.
Perfect. We'll definitely will share it when we publish the interview. Thank you for joining and taking a little bit of your time to share about your transition. I encourage everybody to really go look at the Hidden Opponent and follow Victoria. And if you haven't seen the TED Talk, you should definitely check it out. I think it was a good introduction to what happened in the last couple of years. You were ahead of the game speaking out about it, and I think that was a really good talk. Thanks, Victoria. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening.